Under Lubbock's blue skies, a very special event took place at the Mackenzie Market Alumni Center on November 11th. To celebrate Texas Tech University Press's 50th anniversary, university and community leaders came together this Veterans Day for the annual Literary Lubbock Gala Dinner, benefiting the Press's flagship book series, The Grover E. Murray Studies in the American Southwest. During the seated dinner, Texas authors discussed their books published by Texas Tech University Press, adding true Texas flavor to the culturally inspired meal. TTU President Lawrence Chauvinek and MC Andy Wilkinson welcomed John R. Erickson, Brian H. Griggs, Carol A. Lipscomb, B.C. Robinson, and Chef Adan Medrano.
Based on my recipes, the first book, Truly Texas Mexican and Native Culinary Heritage and Recipes.
Chef Medrano joined Travis Snyder of Texas Tech University Press in Studio E, the professional recording studio in the English department at Texas Tech, to talk about his cooking and his latest TTUP publication, Don't Count the Tortillas, The Art of Texas Mexican Cooking. Available from online book retailers everywhere.
I'm Travis Snyder. I am the acquisitions editor at Texas Tech University Press, which means that my job is to go find books that are worth reading and to do my best to put them in a shape that makes them the most readable. So I am here today talking with one of our authors, Adan Medrano, who has published 2 books with us in the last 5 or 6 years, Truly Texas Mexican and Don't Count the Tortillas, available on our website or any online retailer where you could so choose to find it. Adan, thank you for being here. I'm going to start off with a personal anecdote that I'd like to hear you relate to. So when I was 11 years old, my family stayed in the south of France for about a month. And I was a really horrifically picky eater at that age. And that all changed when, for the first time, I went to a restaurant and we stayed there for 4 hours eating little things that the chef would bring out. And it totally changed the trajectory of my life because I had never before spent 4 hours eating a meal, spent 4 hours having someone talk me through something they were really passionate about. And that memory stayed really strong for me as something that really just, again, changed how I approached food and my overall experience of the cultural significance of that. I wonder if there's anything in your life, early or later, that really sort of changed your relationship with food, with eating, with dining.
That's a great story and evocative for me because when I was in my 20s, I spent time in Lyon and eating, and then I would go behind that door behind which I thought all this magic was happening, and talk to the chefs, and that's where I learned, the vinaigrette, and I learned how to make these things. They were very generous, speaking with me, so I can relate to that. That's French cuisine is very important. In fact, French cuisine is what is taught in most culinary schools. It was taught to me when I went to school, so that's formative for me in later years. But food experiences have been formative for me from a very, very young age. I remember the earliest memory I have of food and connected me to food and the surround that food has, the meaning-making potential of food. I was 5 years old. You wouldn't think that you would remember things like that. I was 4 or 5, around that, but it's one of the first really strong memories. I'm in the corner of my mother's kitchen, and it's winter and it's cold. It's a little cold, and she has just purchased tortillas, corn tortillas. In those days, these corn vendors pushing carts would be selling tortillas because there were corn mills that would ground and make fresh masa. And from that masa they would make tortillas. So the tortillas we got from these vendors were just wonderful.
Yeah.
And so that's my memory. She's reaching over to me with a tortilla. She sprinkles water on it to moisten it up a little bit, as though she were sprinkling fairy dust. And then she rolls it up like a little cigar, and then she says, "Toma," hands it to me. So it's this performative, and that formed me. I mean, that, I'm eating corn, which is ancient, and she's giving it to me in this warmth of hospitality. The mother feeding the child, which is exactly what happens with mother. That's why we call it Mother Earth, because Mother Earth feeds us like a mother, like she was feeding me. The land feeds us, gives us what we eat. So that to me is a formative experience. And since then, I've always loved cooking. Even before I went to culinary school, I was cooking a lot, and knew the meaning of cooking, because as I traveled France and other countries, it was always central.
Yeah. It's so evocative, in particular, for that story to revolve around tortillas too, because I think there's a deceptive simplicity in something like a tortilla, where it seems like, it's you can go pick up a 50-pack at HEB for $2. It must be so simple, so cheap. But the difference between the cardboard grocery store tortillas versus one where the masa is fresh and and you're with someone who knows the process of nixtamalization,
yes,
and all of that. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the sort of the deceptive simplicity of certain foods, and what it's sort of like to move from kind of simple tasks that we learn growing up and cooking versus the really complex meals you learn to execute in culinary school.
Yes, the complexity of all food, actually. I was very happy that Texas Tech University Press went ahead with this most recent book, because this most recent book deals with just that.
Yeah.
The importance of simple foods and the importance of complex foods. In this new book, I show how to make a bean dip that you can use by opening a can, which doesn't have chemicals. But I also have a recipe for chile con queso soufflé. So it goes from the very, very basic to the more complex. But in each of those instances, you have a profound meaning that can narrate who you are. And by that I mean the story of the tortilla being something simple in this way. That I keep saying the tortilla is not a wrap. The tortilla is not just something for something else. It is the thing itself.
Sure.
I was invited, just after this book came out, it was noticed by the U.S. ambassador to Russia living in Moscow and his staff. The New York Times had just written a story about me and my work, and they had mentioned, this book and the previous book. So the ambassador to Russia and his staff contacted me and asked me to cook the meal for the official celebration in Moscow at the ambassador's residence. It's the social event of the season. Everyone wants to go. There's 1,500 people in the palatial gardens of the residence, which is a beautiful place. And I said yes, of course. And we decided to cook tacos. I said, we'll do the tacos that are Texan, so we need flour tortillas. And they said to me, the staff said, oh, no problem. We have flour tortillas at the grocery stores here in Moscow.
Oh, wow.
I thought, okay, here's another, what you mentioned, that it's simply a wrap. And I thought, let me taste it, which they sent it to me. And I said, it won't do.
Yeah.
We want the Russians elite and the artistic people, the bankers, the politicians, to taste our food in Texas. Excuse me. And so I told them, we need to have these tortillas. I cannot make 2,400 tortillas while I'm there. It's just not possible. Yeah. We have to ship them. So at that time, the relations between the U.S. and Russia were not very good. They're worse now, but they were pretty bad. So we couldn't ship them because of the agricultural difficulties. And we thought, maybe I can take them as luggage, this huge thing. And we thought, even if I were able to do that and they covered the cost, if you meet the wrong customs agent,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all over. So they decided to do the diplomatic pouch. So they said, Adan, they said to me, which took a while, they said, get the tortillas, and I said, I can shrink wrap them, and I know they will last for 2 months in the freezer, because we've done this before. So I took all of the tortillas, they said, put them in these 8 boxes, ship them to the embassy grounds in Dulles, in DC, and once they all 8 boxes go there, then we'll do the diplomatic pouch. So they said, they've arrived, we've got a military airlift on its way. It landed, and it took the tortillas, and it lifted off, and it went directly to the embassy grounds in Moscow. So we didn't have to go through customs, nothing. We didn't have to be inspected, and they arrived safely, and they kept them there in the freezer until we arrived. So I'm very happy to say that our Texas Mexican tortillas have diplomatic immunity. We're very proud of that.
That's wonderful.
And they understood that you couldn't just go to the store and buy some. These things they're traditional to the Texas Mexican region. We invented them here in the Texas Mexican region. So you have to do them right and then cook them correctly so that you have the flavor and that you have the texture which will surround the filling that you have. So thank you for asking that question about tortillas.
What did you fill them with for the Russian ambassadors? What kind of tacos did you serve?
Excellent. 2 very traditional iconic dishes that we have. One is carne guisada.
Sure.
Carne guisada is a recipe in my first book. Texas Tech University Press took the risk on this book because there had not been a book like this before. That is, a book that attempts to be a history and a cookbook all at once, a history book. No one had written about the indigenous foodways of Native Americans of Texas. And so the recipes, had to be vetted, with my family, but the peer review process that your press did in 3 disciplines, Native American studies, food anthropology, and archaeology, because those were the 3 ways that I was able to speak about our traditions. So that was an interesting risk that you took.
What would you say that we learn from cookbooks in the disciplinary sense? So you just mentioned 3 different academic disciplines. I wonder how you think of the process of cookbook writing. What sort of historian are you? What sort of stories are collected through the sharing and dissemination of recipes?
That's a great question. Thank you. I've written 2 books which you published. This last one is called Don't Count the Tortillas, The Art of Texas Mexican Cooking. And I had to figure out how is it that food is art? What are the functions of cuisine, both in the sourcing, in the making, and in the performance of eating socially, that functions as art functions? And going to the writing side of it, I figured that out through research, so that the theoretical framework, how food is art, was there. I finally figured that out, and then to actually talk about it, I had to depend on my own experiences, and it comes down to this: food narrates our identity. So when I write about food, I want to do what my mother did for me back in that kitchen. She leaned towards me, she acted in this way, and she presented to me an artifact that had moisture and the aroma of corn, but also had the roasted side of the corn, so that roasted corn aroma was there. So from that time on, I began eating more corn, eating more beans, eating more chiles, and that actually formed my identity. And so food, and she narrated my identity through all those years. I try to replicate that in the cookbooks, and it's very important. what I tell students who are in college and graduate school, write down recipes. The recipes narrate who we are over time. And in my books, I go back to this, that Texas Tech University Press has published these two books, which are very different from other books published. And that is, it is not just a cookbook with recipes, it's a history book about who you are because of the food. And I think that mimics how food actually acts in our lives, because food narrates every time we eat. I wanted the cookbooks to do that, and that's how I wrote them. By going back to my experiences of how important food is to every aspect of our identity, of our memory, how we are in community, whom we invite to be members of our community by inviting to the table. All of these aspects are with food, and that's how I like to write about it. It's in the movie as well.
I was going to ask about moving from, you've published 2 books with us. We've been very fortunate to publish those 2 books. And you recently completed, well, I don't know how recent it is these days, but a documentary based on that, which shares the title of your first book, Truly Texas Mexican, which is available on Amazon. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, if you say that recipes kind of narrate our identity, I wonder if for you making a documentary was a similar artistic endeavor, or if it was a different process for you.
Thank you. Yes, I love talking about this because filmmaking was my first career. When I graduated from Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, my degree was in communication arts and philosophy, and for the next 15 years I made films. Then I went into another career, which was grant making, giving money away to projects all around the world, which then reintroduced me to food, because everywhere I went to make grants to these projects, they would show me who they were by taking me to dinner or taking me to lunch.
Sure.
So I realized this connection, and I thought that filmmaking was in my past. And when a friend of mine in Latin America read Truly Texas Mexican, he said, this should be a movie because it resonates with indigenous communities all throughout Latin America. It's the indigenous story of being grounded on the land. And you don't have to be Native American here. You can be German, you can be Anglo, you can be English, and still be rooted to the ground, to the land. Ultimately, we are all fed by the same mother. So I thought that was great. I ended up being the writer. The writer for it was interesting because if you see the movie is an Amazon Prime movie. It was released in March of this year, and it's won major awards internationally. Best documentary at the New York Independent Cinema Awards, which was great. And to write the story, I simply went to the recent book that you published, Don't Count the Tortillas, The Art of Texas Mexican Cooking. If you read that book, the artist who cooks grapefruit pie, other women who cook dishes, and the recipes are in that book, they show up in the film. And so that's what I did. I simply asked them, would they, since they had been so good with me to share their recipes for the book, would they actually talk to me on camera? And so they invited us into their homes. And the story of the film is a exercise in writing, which takes what the book can do and then goes into the more personal dimension of what the book cannot do. And that's what a movie can do. And a movie can make you be with the person in that kitchen in a very intimate space. And that's what we did. If you see the movie is a throwback to what I call the pure, the genuine, the original cinema verite. For you who studied film, the cinema verite was, you take the film camera and you simply let it roll. There's no edit, and it's cinema verite. It's a very powerful way of doing it. That's what we did. But we modernized it because we actually do edit. But the way we shot it was the cinematographer, who is an excellent cinematographer from Uruguay, his name is Gabriel Bendan. You find the location, he and the director, they find the location of the space within which I and the interviewed person are, and the food, the countertop, the knife, and he positions it, and then we roll, and then we start talking. I know where the camera is. We never do second takes. We didn't say, as many documentaries do, you know, we didn't quite catch that. Would you fry that egg again?
Yeah.
We never did that, ever. We just let the camera go, and life evolves. Life happens. That's how we shot this. And the question to me with filmmaking, as opposed to the difference between filmmaking and the book, is that filmmaking is very, very close to those verses, those fiction style of books, where when you read the book, you're there. You know, there's a style of writing that takes you there. So in this film, I believe that when you see it, you'll have to be the judge. You're not looking at the people. You are with the people. You're in their homes, and you're actually listening to them share very intimate stories.
Wonderful. I've got two questions that are, one is a little polemical. You've lived in a couple of different cities in Texas, and I wonder if you can talk about your favorite food city in Texas. It can be in Texas or otherwise, but we're in Texas now, and I want to hear some of your opinions.
Okay, well, since I'm in Lubbock, I think Lubbock is the best food city in Texas.
Get out of here. Get out of here with that.
When I was in San Antonio, I said, San Antonio is the best food city in Texas. That actually is true. It depends on where the traditions are. You can have wonderful chicken fried steak in Lubbock. And there are some places in Texas where you cannot find a good chicken fried steak.
Sure.
So I think for me, the interesting thing about going to restaurants is finding those restaurants where the chefs are rooted in the land of that space. We say Mexican food, Thai food. I don't believe that food has nationality. I think food has roots, and it's rooted in the particular landscape. And I would say, for my taste, Texas Mexican food, the food that I write about in the two books that we've published together, I would say San Antonio, the Rio Grande Valley, and northeastern Mexico will be the place where you can find the best of that type of food. You can also find it in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, because people from that region have traveled there and have set up restaurants. But they will call them Tejano restaurants. They will call them, and they're very, very nostalgic in the sense that they take you back to the taste that you had there.
Well, Adan, I was actually going to ask you to define Texas Mexican cooking, but in your last response, you answered that perfectly. So instead, I will simply leave off and look forward to eating with you later tonight.